He tried to speak, but uttered only growls. His greedy jaws were bent on slaughter still. His vesture changed to shaggy hair, his arms to legs, and he became a wolf. He looks a wolf. The hoary hair remains, the same wild visage, and the blazing eyes still flash with all their old ferocity. When we think of the werewolf today, our minds immediately fly to Hollywood imagery. We think of silver bullets, full moons, an infectious disease passed through a desperate bite, and a helpless victim screaming as their bones shatter into a monstrosity. But if you want to find the true, terrifying origin of the Wolfman, you have to peel back centuries of pop culture. You have to travel thousands of years into the past, leaving behind the dark forests of Germany and Transylvania, and step into the sun-drenched, rugged, and deeply isolated mountains of Arcadia, Greece. The ancient Greeks didn't view the werewolf as a generic horror movie monster. They called them lycanthropos, the wolfmen. To the ancient mind, transformation wasn't an infection of the blood. It was a spiritual mirroring of a broken soul. It was a curse from the cosmos, a manifestation of primal madness and the ultimate punishment of the gods. Today, we are diving deep into the ancient archives. We will uncover a family bloodline born directly from the dirt, a cannibalistic feast that horrified the king of Olympus, an active, real-world regional cult that practiced human sacrifice, and a bizarre Roman ghost story involving a magical ring of urine. This is the true, untold history of the Arcadian Wolf Cult. The story starts with King Lycaon, the ruler of Arcadia. He was the son of King Pelasgus, a primordial being born directly out of the earth, and who first introduced civilization into the Arcadian region. Lycaon was a progeny of his earthborn father and a nymph, depending on the source, either an ocean or a mountain nymph. Lycaon had a massive bloodline of his own, fathering at least 50 sons. Each of these sons spread across the wilderness, building settlements and founding cities in their own names. Lycaon also had a daughter named Callisto. By all accounts, she was remarkably beautiful, so beautiful that she caught the attention of the oft-wandering king of the gods, Zeus. Charmed by her beauty, Zeus descended to the earth and assaulted her. From this tragic union, a child named Arcas was born. It is from the boy's name that the entire region eventually took its title, Arcadia. There are a few different versions of how King Lycaon was turned into a wolf, but the most popular and exciting version is a dark tale of divine vengeance. By all accounts, Lycaon was a tyrannical king. Under his rule, Arcadia was gripped by cruelty, and this darkness was spreading across the globe. The state of the world had degenerated into absolute lawlessness, violence, and impiety. Humans had abandoned the gods, and Lycaon was leading the descent into savagery. Word of this global corruption reached Mount Olympus. Zeus decided to personally descend to Earth in human disguise to see if the rumours of the world's wickedness and Lycaon's tyranny were true. When Zeus arrived at the palace, the people fell to their knees, sensing his divine presence. But King Lycaon only mocked them. To test the god's divinity, Lycaon decided to invite the king of Olympus to a grand banquet where he would be the honoured guest, all the while hatching a horrific plan. He had stolen the young boy Arcas from his dwelling. The tyrant king had then chopped the child into pieces, boiled his flesh, and mixed the human meat into the dishes prepared for the god. Lycaon had the cannibalistic dish served directly to Zeus. But you cannot deceive the gods. Enraged by the foul offering, Zeus immediately stood up and overturned the banquet table. In his fury, Zeus raised his hand, summoned a bolt of lightning, and hurled it at King Lycaon. As the lightning struck, Lycaon's clothes turned to fur, and his limbs became paws, transforming the wicked tyrant into a wolf. Zeus then gathered the cooked remains of Arcas, and using his divine power, pieced the boy back together, restoring him to life. To commemorate this event, the city built on that very spot was named Trapezus, derived from the Greek word for the table that Zeus had overturned. This is the core twist of the myth. Lycaon's intentions are usually explained away as a test, a sick game to see if Zeus was truly divine enough to recognize that he was being served human flesh. But looking at the timeline, one cannot rule out a darker motive, that this gruesome feast was a desperate act of revenge for the injustice Zeus had inflicted upon Lycaon's daughter, Callisto. For Callisto's tragedy did not end with her father's downfall. The jealous, watchful gaze of Hera, the Queen of Heaven, had uncovered Zeus's infidelity. Seeking absolute retribution, Hera struck the girl down, transforming Callisto into a wild bear. Her sleek human beauty was stripped away, replaced by coarse black fur and jagged claws. But Hera's wrath was insatiable. It wasn't enough to reduce the king's daughter to a beast. Hera explicitly demanded Callisto's death. In some traditions, the queen of the gods went directly to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, pointing out the bear in the woods and demanding that she pierce it with her silver arrows. In other accounts, Hera engineered a far more sadistic plot. She guided a grown Arcas, who had become a renowned hunter, directly into his mother's territory. When the bear rushed forward to embrace her long-lost child, the boy raised his spear, ready to strike. To prevent the horrific tragedy of matricide, Zeus was forced to intervene at the final second. He snatched them both up into the cosmos, placing them among the stars as the eternal constellations of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great and Little Bears. Yet even in the night sky, Hera's spite followed them. She demanded that the sea gods never allow the constellations to dip below the horizon, forcing them to wander the cold, dark sky eternally, never allowed to rest. It was the weight of all this, Hera's vicious demands for blood, and Lycaon's gruesome retaliation at the banquet table, that finally broke Zeus's patience with humanity. The horror of that night proved to the king of the gods that the mortal world was corrupted beyond repair. Returning to Olympus, Zeus unleashed a catastrophic global flood, the mythic deluge of Deucalion. Oceans rose, the skies opened, and massive torrents of water completely submerged the earth, drowning the corrupt Bronze Age of man. The entire world was washed clean, all because of the monstrous sins of a single Arcadian family. On that single, blood-stained night, the legend of the first werewolf didn't just spawn a monster, it broke the world. If this were just a campfire myth, it would be fascinating enough. But to the ancient Greeks, Lycaon's transformation wasn't a relic of a distant past. It was an active, terrifying regional reality that was practiced for centuries. High on the windswept, mist-shrouded peaks of Mount Lycaeus, a genuine, historical cult operated in absolute secrecy. They worshipped a dark, localized aspect of the sky god known as Zeus Lycaeus, the wolf Zeus. The geographer Pausanias, writing in his descriptions of Greece, provides a chilling eyewitness detail of the landscape. He notes that on the very highest peak of the mountain stood an earth altar to Zeus, which was essentially a massive mound of compressed ash left over from centuries of burnt sacrifices. In front of this altar stood two monumental pillars, topped with gilded eagles facing the rising sun. Pausanias drops a haunting hint about what happened on that mountain. He writes, "On this altar, they offer secret sacrifices to Zeus Lycaeus. I was reluctant to pry into the details of this sacrifice. Let it be as it is, and as it was, from the beginning." In keeping with their bloody roots, the cultists of Zeus Lycaeus engaged in human sacrifice. Unlike the tamer sacrifices of their neighbours, the Athenians, the Arcadians insisted that their mountain deity demanded that human blood must be shed in his name. So what were the details that Pausanias was so reluctant to reveal? Well, we can find the answer in Plato's Republic. There, he accuses the Arcadians of ritual cannibalism. The sacrificial victim is minced up and mixed in a bowl with other meats. The unfortunate participant who consumes the human meat is to be transformed into a wolf, wherein he must remain for a 9-year sentence. He can only return to his human shape if he completely abstains from consuming any meat during that 9-year tenure. It seems those ancestral predilections still ran afoul in Arcadia, long after Lycaon. We actually have historical records of real flesh and blood people who claimed to have survived this terrifying 9-year trial. The most famous case is Demarchus, a real-world Arcadian boxer who lived around 400 BC. Pausanias records that Demarchus took part in the ritual, tasted the sacrificial meat, and spent nearly a decade running wild in the mountains as a wolf. He successfully resisted the urge to hunt humans for 9 long years, and when his time was up, he swam back, put his clothes on, and returned to civilization. He did not hide in shame. Instead, he channeled the raw, predatory ferocity that he had learned in the wild into physical sports. He resumed his heavy athletic training, travelled to the ancient Olympic Games, and won the boxing championship. The citizens of Arcadia didn't view him as a monster to be exiled. They viewed him as a hero who had looked into the abyss of the animal world and successfully conquered the beast within his own soul. Outside of the yearly harrowing, the temple at the top of the mount was regarded as a permanent no-go zone. If a hunter chased his quarry to that temple and the animal entered, he would not dare pursue it. He would wait or retreat, because entering the temple meant certain death within a year. Furthermore, it was said that any human or animal that entered the temple did not cast any shadow. Their mortal sentence had already been spiritually sealed. To the ancient Greeks, this wasn't just limited to a single mountaintop. It was an active, terrifying regional reality built into their lore. The Roman natural historian Pliny the Elder dug through the archives of an ancient Greek writer named Anthus, who claimed to have discovered the official records of the Arcadians. Anthus discovered that there was a highly specific noble bloodline in Arcadia known as the House of Anthus. By a decree of ancient destiny, one member of this family was always required to be transformed into a wolf. Every generation, the family would gather and cast lots. Whichever poor soul drew the short straw was escorted by his relatives deep into the Arcadian wilderness until they reached the shore of a specific stagnant pool of water. There, the chosen family member was forced to strip completely naked. His family took his human garments and hung them safely on the branches of a nearby sacred oak tree. Then the naked youth dove into the dark, freezing waters and swam across to the far side. The moment his feet touched the opposite shore, his human form was shattered. He was transfigured into a wolf and vanished into the wilderness to live, hunt, and run with a wild pack. But this regional curse came with a strict psychological test. It was a trial of pure willpower. The law of the Anthus stated that if the man could live as a wolf for 9 consecutive years without ever tasting human flesh, the curse would break. On the 10th year, he was allowed to return to the edge of the pool and swim back across the water. The moment he reached his starting point, he would receive his human shape once again, with 2 incredible details preserved by ancient writers. First, the writer Fabius claimed that when the man returned, his clothes were still hanging on the exact same oak branch, completely untouched by time, rot, or thieves. Second, the man didn't return looking exactly as he did when he jumped in. His human body had physically aged, looking exactly 9 years older, bearing the invisible weight of a decade spent as a beast. But if he gave in to his predatory hunger and tasted human meat even once during those 9 years, he was trapped in the skin of a wolf forever. Because these wolfmen were so deeply integrated into Arcadian history, a bizarre wave of local folk magic sprouted around the beasts. The locals firmly believed that a wolf possessed hidden supernatural properties. Specifically, it was common law that hidden inside the tip of a wolf's tail was a tiny magical string of hair capable of acting as a powerful love potion, instantly procuring the absolute devotion of anyone who touched it. But there was a catch to this primitive witchcraft. The wolf was a highly intelligent and spiteful creature. The ancients believed that if a wolf was captured or cornered by hunters, it would purposefully rip out or cast away this magical string from its tail. It was believed that the hair lost all of its magical properties and virtues unless it was taken from the beast while it was still alive and breathing. Furthermore, the ancients observed that the wolf was bound by the strict laws of nature. They believed the creature only went to rut and mated for a mere 12 days out of the entire year, spending the rest of its time in solitary, calculated silence. As the centuries rolled on and Greek trade networks expanded across the Mediterranean, explorers began to realize that wolf transformation wasn't just confined to the mountains of Arcadia. They started discovering echoes of this terrifying magic in foreign cultures. In the 5th century BC, the legendary father of history, Herodotus, travelled northeast into the wild, untamed territories of Scythia, located in modern-day Eastern Europe. There he encountered a mysterious nomadic tribe known as the Neuri. When Herodotus interviewed the neighbouring Scythians and the Greek merchants living in the region, they swore to him with absolute certainty that the Neuri were a nation of powerful sorcerers. They claimed that once every year, for just a few days, every single member of the Neuri tribe, men, women and children, would suddenly transform into wolves, abandoning their camps to hunt in the wilderness before shifting back into their human shapes as if nothing had ever happened. Herodotus, ever the skeptic, wrote down the account with a note of dry humour. He writes, "The Scythians and the Greeks settled in Scythia say that once a year, every one of the Neuri becomes a wolf for a few days and then changes back again into his former shape. And now they cannot persuade me to believe this, but they state it nonetheless, and they swear to it as a fact." Whether the Neuri were practicing a form of shamanistic ritual where they wore wolf pelts, or if they suffered from a shared cultural delusion, the ancient world was utterly convinced that entire societies could shed their human skin at will. Centuries later, the Romans took these raw Greek traditions and turned them into the world's first genuine horror fiction. The absolute peak of ancient werewolf storytelling comes from the Roman author Petronius in his famous book, the Satyricon. During a wild dinner party, a former slave named Niceros tells a harrowing story from his youth. He writes, "My master had gone to Capua to sell some old clothing, so I seized the opportunity and persuaded our guest to bear me some company about 5 miles outside of the town, for he was a soldier and as bold as death. We sat about the cockcrow, and the moon shone as bright as a day. When coming among some monuments, my man began to converse with the stars, whilst I jogged along, singing and counting them. Presently I looked back after him, and saw him strip away and lay his clothes by the side of the road. My heart was in my mouth in an instant. I stood like a corpse, when right before my eyes he urinated in a perfect circle completely around his clothing. Instantly, in a crack, he set up a deafening howl and was turned into a wolf. Don't think that I am joking. I would not tell you a lie for the finest fortune in the world. But to continue, after he was turned into a wolf, he made straight for the woods. At first I did not know whether I was on my head or my heels, but at last, going to take up his clothing, I found that the circle of urine had acted as a magical binding spell, and his garments had completely turned to solid stone. The sweat streamed from me, and I never expected to get over it. Melissa began to wonder why I walked so late. "Had you come a little sooner," she said, "you might at least have lent us a hand, for a wolf broke into the farm and has butchered all of our cattle, but though he got off, it was no laughing matter for him, for a servant of ours ran him through with a pike. Hearing this, I could not close an eye, but as soon as it was daylight I ran home, like a peddler that had been eased of his pack. Coming to the place where the clothes had been turned into stone, I saw nothing but a pool of blood, and when I got home, I found my soldier lying in bed, like an ox in a stool, and a surgeon dressing his neck. I saw at once that he was a fellow who could change his skin, a Vesepolis, and never after could I eat bread with him. No, not if you would have killed me. Those who would have taken a different view of the case are welcome to their opinion. If I tell you a lie, may your genie confound me. From the blood-soaked, ash-filled altars of Mount Lycaeus, to the shifting magical tribes of the East, and finally to the cinematic, stone-turning ghost stories of ancient Rome, the classical world laid the exact, unbroken blueprint for the modern monster. They didn't need Hollywood special effects, because they understood a fundamental truth about human psychology. They knew that the werewolf isn't terrifying because of its claws, or its teeth, or its speed. It is terrifying because it represents the fragility of human civilization. It is a reminder that no matter how many cities we build, no matter how many clothes that we wear, and no matter how civilized we pretend to be, the ancient, predatory beast of Arcadia has never truly died. It is still hiding, waiting for the right curse, the right ritual, or the right moment of madness to break out from right beneath our skin. This has been the Arcane Lantern. Until next time, keep your light burning.